recall.
And at that time frame, in November of 2008, in your view, who were the people who could instruct Mr. Martin to draft a contract? If not county council members, then who could?
The administrator.
And at some point in time, did you become aware that a contract for the proposed employment of Mr. Cunningham was actually drafted?
Yes.
How did you become aware of that?
It was handed to me.
By who?
I believe it was Mr. Cunningham, but I can't say for sure at this time.
Did you know when that was?
The night of November 18th.
And what did you do with the contract? This is a proposed contract now for Mr. Cunningham. What did you do with it when you received it?
It was in an envelope, filled up, and I handed it to Mrs. Floyd.
And is that because you had already talked with Ms. Floyd about the fact that she was going to be the person who would present that proposed contract?
She had requested it.
Mr. Greer, you would agree that every council member has the right to put any matters they wish on the agenda in advance of a county council meeting, correct?
Subject to approval by the chairman.
Okay. So would it be a better way to say it that every county council member has the right to suggest matters for the agenda to the chair?
The chair can approve or reject, and some were rejected at times.
Okay. So there's nothing to prevent you from asking the chair to put a matter on the agenda.
That's correct.
You personally could have asked Mr. Thompson to add consideration of Mr. Preston's severance agreement as an agenda item for a county council meeting, couldn't you?
I could.
And the restriction, if I understand it, tell me if I'm wrong, but the county council agenda has to be in the way you guys did it, was the Friday before a Tuesday meeting. Is that
No, sir, that's incorrect.
How much before a meeting do you have to have the agenda?
The items have to be presented to the council clerk by Wednesday, or did. I don't know how they operate now. But at that time, you had to have it to the council clerk by Wednesday so that she could prepare the agenda packets and have them delivered by Friday.
Would you agree with me, Mr. Greer, that there were upcoming county council meetings remaining on the calendar year of 2008 where you could have asked to put on the agenda in advance the fact that you were going to try to discuss Mr. Preston's severance agreement and Mr. Cunningham's proposed employment contract?
We could have.
In fact, there was a meeting to be held November 18, 2008. That's the one at which it was considered, right?
That's correct.
There was also a meeting coming up on December the 2nd. Do you remember that?
I don't remember the dates. But they would have been, it was possible to have two in December, whatever the dates were.
In fact, what I want to do, if I showed you the meeting minutes for those meetings, would that refresh your recollection as to how many meetings were left in 2008?
I don't need to see the minutes. We had two per month, one on the first Tuesday, one on the third Tuesday.
Well, if I show you the meeting minutes, you'll actually see there were 3 left in December.
Yeah,
which is probably unusual.
3.
Let me show you. This might help you remember this. May I just approach Your Honor for refreshment of recollection purposes?
You may.
I think I've got it. Mr. Greer, I'm just going to show you just 3 cover pages. I've not marked this as an exhibit. I'll represent to you that those are the cover pages of meeting minutes for county council meetings in December of 2008, to see if that refreshes your memory as to how many county council meetings were left in 2008.
If you'll look at the third one, you evidently missed something, because the third one says special call meeting. That's not a regularly scheduled meeting. You don't have any knowledge that that's going to occur until approximately the time it occurs.
Okay, and that's a fair point. So there were only, based on looking at these documents, you would agree there were only 2 remaining county council meetings that were regularly scheduled.
In December.
In December. In addition, it turns out that there was a 3rd meeting that was actually called at the very end of the month.
That's what it says.
And would you agree with me that you could have made an attempt to put the severance agreement of Mr. Preston and the employment agreement of Mr. Cunningham on the agenda for any one of those meetings, correct?
Usually when you have a special call meeting, you have to indicate what that meeting is for, and you can't deviate from it. Okay. So unless I was privy, and I don't know that I was, to the preparation of the agenda for that meeting, the answer could be no.
So at least for the two regularly called, the regularly scheduled ones, you could have tried to put these items on the agenda. Fair enough?
That was possible.
Did you ever suggest to anyone that the decision on Mr. Preston's severance agreement and the decision on Mr. Cunningham's employment be postponed until one of those later meetings?
No.
Would you agree that it was not necessary for county council to hire Mr. Cunningham at the November 18th meeting?
No.
You don't agree?
No.
You think it was necessary?
Yes.
Do you agree that county council could have postponed the decision to hire Mr. Cunningham from the November 18th meeting?
Yes.
You would turn to page 147 of your transcript. This is a short section I would like to refer you to. Once you get there, it's from line 7 to line 14.
Line 7 to 14.
Right.
Okay.
And once you've had a chance to look at it, first just let me ask you, is there anything about that testimony that you think is incorrect or should be changed from what you said in your deposition?
Okay, in the deposition question, you asked, was it necessary from Anderson County's perspective? And I said that it was not necessary, and you said right, and I said I don't guess it was necessary. No.
And would you still stand by that testimony today, that from the county's perspective at least, it was not necessary to hire Mr. Cunningham at that meeting?
It was not necessary, but my perspective was that it was necessary to ensure some continuity in the government of Anderson County. And so from my perspective, it was necessary.
Would you agree with me, Mr. Greer, that you could maintain continuity within the administration of Anderson County by simply hiring Mr. Cunningham as an interim administrator?
Like we have now?
Is that a guess?
I guess we could have, but we have an interim administrator that we've had for going on 4 years now.
Yeah, but and the point there I'm just making is, in terms of continuity, you still get continuity if you hired Mr. Cunningham as an interim administrator rather than hiring him permanently as administrator. Would you agree with that?
Could have. I wouldn't have recommended it. I don't think Mr. Cunningham would have accepted it.
And that's not the choice you made, correct?
No.
We earlier in the case saw a video of what happened at the county council meeting on November 18th. Would you agree with me, Mr. Greer, that you were not concerned with whether the way in which Mr. Preston's severance agreement was handled was fair to the two council members who voted against it? Would you agree with that?
You're going to have to state your question again and take a little more time.
I'm sorry, I'm going to ask it slower. I'm going to ask you if you agree with this statement. Would you agree that you were not concerned with whether the way in which Mr. Preston's severance agreement was handled at the November 18th meeting was fair to the two council members who voted against it?
Let me answer you this way. I believe that my actions treated them just as fairly as I had been treated over the years that I served on council with them.
And my question, and I appreciate that response, the question is, you were not concerned with whether it was fair to those two council members, were you?
I think I was just as fair to them as they were to me.
Let me ask you, look at page 127 of your transcript. If you look starting at line 13 through line 20.
I see that.
Is there anything about that testimony you gave that was incorrectly recorded by the court reporter?
If I was going to answer it again after reflection, where I gave the answer, I think it was fair to them, my answer would be the same as it was today. I was just as fair to them as they've been to me.
And your answer in your deposition was When I asked you if you thought it was fair, you said, quite honestly, I'm not concerned with whether it was fair to them or not. That was your answer, right?
And I would add to that because they never were concerned with how fair they were to me.
In November of 2008, would you agree with me that you did not know that the chair of county council, Mr. Thompson, had actually applied for a job in Anderson County?
Oh, no, we don't. State your question again.
In November of 2008, would you agree that you did not know that Mr. Thompson, county council chair, had applied for a job in Anderson County?
I would say I was not aware of that, yes.
You agree that Mr. Thompson did not tell you that, did he?
To the best of my recollection, no.
And you did not know that Mr. Thompson was taking appraisal courses in the fall of 2008 at county expense, correct?
I don't think I did, no.
You did not know that within days after your November 18th meeting, Mr. Thompson requested and received an advance from the county in the amount of $2,749.80 to continue taking appraisal courses into 2009, correct?
State your question.
It's a long question, I'm sorry. You agree that you did not know that within days of the November 18th meeting, Mr. Thompson requested and received a $2,700+ advance from the county to take appraisal courses into 2009.
At that time.
Right, you didn't know it at the time, did you? Is that correct?
That's correct.
You know that I'm sorry.
Refresh my memory. What was the date of that?
The
That
advance.
you just asked him about. What was
Yes.
that?
The date, there's different dates on it, Your Honor, but November 26th is a date that's stamped on it. Mr. Preston signed it, but couldn't say, as I recall, whether he signed it the day that it's
I
stamped.
just wanted to make sure I was thinking about the same one that you were asking.
And I can find it.
Just to clarify for me, you can go ahead.
You know that Miss Allison Shawn is the daughter of Ron Wilson,
Do I know that she is?
Right.
I do now.
and did you know that back in November of 2008?
I don't know that I did.
Did you know back in November of 2008, before you voted on Mr. Preston's severance agreement, that Ms. Shawn's company had a consulting contract with Anderson County that had been approved by Mr. Preston?
I had no first-hand knowledge of that.
Mr. Preston helped you raise money for your political campaigns in the past, didn't he?
He may have mentioned to some people that they might need to contribute, yes.
You're aware that, in fact, he did suggest to some people that they contribute to your campaign, correct?
I never heard him.
Did he tell you he suggested to people they contribute to your campaign?
Not that I recall.
Did you know that he was suggesting to people that they contribute to your campaign?
Objection, Your Honor, and that calls for speculation, because he's answered he didn't know. And he's asking what he knows.
That hasn't been asked and answered. He said he didn't know.
Well,
Now, if there's a change in your question,
I was trying to get at the base of knowledge first. I went at it backwards. I thought he would answer differently based on his transcript. So I'm backing up now to try to establish, did he know, yes or no, and then how did he know?
well, let's try not to ask questions because sometimes this is taking long enough, but I want you to fully present it. But once they ask the question, let's move on. Answer the question. Let's move on. Go ahead. I'll let you ask that question.
I'll just ask it this way. Do you agree with me that Mr. Preston suggested to some people that they contribute to your political campaign at any point in time?
He possibly did, yes.
In March of 2006, you were the chair of county council, correct?
2006. I don't remember the dates. I'd have to go back and look them up.
You were aware, let me ask it this way, you were aware of this Caters Lake incident that a lot of people in Anderson County know about?
Your Honor, the subject to our previous objections, I don't know if this is going to be a proper, but we have continuing objections to this line.
Your objections will continue. You may proceed subject to the objections.
Would you agree that you presided over a county council meeting in March of 2006 where the Caters Lake incident was discussed?
I think I did, yes.
And a presentation was made at that council meeting by Deputy Chief Boucher about the incident at Caters Lake, right?
Sheriff Crenshaw and the deputy.
And in addition, a statement was given to council by Mr. Preston about what happened at Caters Lake. Is that
I
fair?
think that's correct.
Did you have any first-hand knowledge of any kind of undercover operation, such as the one described by Mr. Boucher and Mr. Preston at that meeting?
What do you mean by first-hand knowledge?
Like, did you personally know of any such undercover operation?
No.
In your mind, is it important that the county administrator tell the truth to the county council?
I would say yes.
And if it were proven that a county administrator, or if it was proven that your county administrator had a improper relationship with a county employee during your tenure on county council, you would agree that that would be grounds for termination, correct?
If it was termination based on the contract under which he was employed.
Do you recall, if you look at page 177 of your transcript, I'm going to direct your attention to 177, line 20, through 178, line 9.
Line what now?
I'm sorry, 177, line 20, through 178, line 9.
Okay. Now what's the question?
Is there anything about the testimony as transcribed in your deposition transcript that you think was incorrectly transcribed or in error?
Not incorrectly transcribed, but after further reflection and thinking back to the contract, I've said if it could be proven, but I would have to also amend that answer by stating if it could be proven that it was a violation of his contract. And I think his contract says he has to be convicted of moral, what's the word I'm looking for?
Crime of moral turpitude.
Moral turpitude.
Does the contract also include a provision that says the county administrator has to obey the Constitution and laws of South Carolina as part of his duties?
I don't recall that.
Let me just finish by asking, Your Honor, I think we've got an agreement with respect to Claims Exhibit 33, which is a transcript of a portion of the March 21st, 2006 County Council meeting, that we can offer this. It is subject to the same objections that they have. I don't intend to ask any other questions about it. I just want to offer it this time.
It'll be again subject to your objection. Put on the list of challenged evidence like the other matters that we.
With that, Mr. Greer, I thank you for your time. Please answer any questions. Attorneys for Richard Preston.
Okay, so excuse me. No problem. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Greer, I'm going to ask you a first question while I'm standing over here so that I can make sure that...
Would you excuse me just a moment, please? All right.
I apologize. I'm going to ask you a question first while I have my deposition in front of me. Would you go back to page 127 of your deposition in the question that Mr. Tessier asked you about, and you said that had you thought about it with regard to the fairness, you might answer differently. Can you read what your answer was when you answered Mr. Tessier's question, lines 22 through the next page, line 2?
127, line 22 through
The
line
next page
2.
on line 2, yes, sir.
Because they weren't concerned about being fair to me and other council members as they pursued their course of action. When Mr. Waller stood in the meeting in Tylerville and made the statement, "Boss Hogg is dead, we're getting on things I had, we're done."
And who was he talking about when he was talking about Boss Hogg?
Me.
He referred to you as that?
That was the implication of what he said, yes ma'am.
Now, let's talk about a couple other things. You talked about the way that you make decisions. Can you tell me about your deliberative decision-making process?
My deliberative decision-making process is that I'm a listener. I recall one of the first meetings that I attended as a newly elected council member in '99 was in our efforts to deal with Santee Cooper. And at that meeting, Mr. Preston sat in on the meeting, and we were meeting with two representatives from Santee Cooper. And Mr. Preston, through facial expressions and body language, seemed concerned that I wasn't saying much. But my deliberative process is that I'm a listener. I listen carefully to what's being said, and then I form my opinions and my actions based on what I've heard in my course of actions.
Are you a person who rubber stamps things?
No, ma'am.
And when Mr. Bright came to talk to the Personnel Committee, let's talk a little bit about that. When was that Personnel Committee appointed?
I believe that Personnel Committee was appointed, initially I think Mr. Waller appointed that Personnel Committee the previous council year. And then I think when Mr. Thompson took office, he reappointed the committee.
And under your rules for council, when would that have occurred?
Should have been in January
Of 2008?
of 2008.
Long before the primary registration in March of 2008?
Yes, ma'am.
Long before the primary happened in June of 2008?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's your testimony that Mr. Thompson just continued the committee appointments of the prior chair, Bob Walter?
I'm not sure if it was the same makeup because I don't recall what the makeup of the committee was the year before. But that was the committee that was established under Mr. Thompson.
In your 10 years on county council, had a personnel committee ever had to deal with a matter of the weight and magnitude that the severance and anticipatory breach of contract claim and the tort claims alleged were?
Not to my knowledge.
Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the other issues in this case. Who else was on the personnel committee with you again?
Mr. Wilson and Mr. McAbee.
Do you recall in 2007 that one of the priorities of the council that they set was to promote sustainable agriculture in Anderson County?
I think that was done in one of the workshops or whatever that we had.
And that process, if I understand it correctly, is that the council, do you want some water?
I'm fine.
Okay. That the council has a workshop and a working session, and you all set what your goals are for the county to instruct the county administrator how you want him to prioritize his time and the county's resources over the next year.
That's correct.